Hi, head people. Good afternoon. Good evening, wherever you may be on the face of the planet. This is my climate story with Tosin. A platform where we invite climate leaders around the world, people who are working on the front line response to climate change, to share their experiences. What is their climate stories? Oftentimes, people wonder if climate change is only like a scientific discussion, but I oftentimes disagree because all around us we see climate change in different ways, in the melting of the ice cap, in sea level rise, in extreme weather conditions. So one way or the other, we are all affected. We all witness the impact of climate change around us, in our communities, on our neighbors, in our families, both near and far. And so we have people who are working on responding to climate change, share their climate stories so that people can find inspiration and also believe that climate change is actually real. People live that reality every day. And so today we have joined us Janet Redman. Welcome, Janet Redman.
Thank you, Tosin. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Great. Thank you for joining us. By the way, who's Janet Redman?
What is it?
I said, by the way, who is Janet Redman? Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Okay. Well, I am currently I'm working at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, which is a climate action group based in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. We also do federal work, and I'm the Director of Engagement and Partnerships. So my job is to both raise money and raise awareness for my nonprofit within our region. We are small but mighty, and we punch above our weight class as a small nonprofit. So this is a new world for me, though, I will say. I was in the corporate world for 30 years, and after lots of twists and turns and nothing ever happening to plan, I have found myself here, and I'm very, very happy. This is my first job in the climate world.
Wow. Quite an interesting job and rewarding too. You're welcome on board, but why this time? Why did you choose to do this?
Well, I have always been an environmentalist. Going back to growing up, I grew up in Baltimore around the Chesapeake Bay. My dad was one of 10, he was 10th of 11 kids that were born on a farm in Chestertown, Maryland. And so, you know, being outside was really my growing up years. Being outside, being around the bay, being seeing, you know, what was going on in the farm environment, in the agricultural world. And as I grew, as I got older, when I was 16, I sent a letter to our state senator and complained about the state of the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is, you know, it's a jewel here. The watershed itself goes all the way up to New York. So it's a huge watershed. But back then, the bay was dying, and there were dead zones. Oysters were catching MSX, and so their population was down. The blue crab population was down. I'm from Baltimore, so I love steamed crabs, and you know, we used to go crabbing all the time. And I saw that things were changing, and I wrote this letter to my state senator and said, we need legislation in place that stops runoff into the bay, that protects. And she very smartly wrote back to me and gave me a 2-year scholarship in marine biology to the University of Maryland. So, so her response was, "You're right. You know, have at it. Go fix it." And I did. I mean, I went to the University of Maryland for 2 years as a marine biology major, and back then there was not a 4-year degree, and I kind of got swept up into, you know, I got to get out into the workforce, and I switched to business. And I worked at Verizon for 23 years, which is our telecommunications company. I was a project manager there towards the end, and then I left, and I was going to go back into the world of marine biology, and got accepted into a program. And while I was waiting for it to start, I entered into a financial advising training program, and I got waylaid for 12 years being a financial advisor, which I loved. I got an MBA from Hopkins along the way with a specialty in economics. And as an advisor, I put a lot of time into researching companies, and I developed what I called a low carbon footprint portfolio.
Oh.
And so I had between 15 and 18 companies in that. And so they were the renewable energy companies, the companies that had sustainability statements. And this portfolio outperformed the S&P 500 for 5 years.
Oh, really?
And yes, and I still manage it just on my own. And it showed me that a couple of things: people care, consumers care that what they are buying and the companies they purchase from are doing the right thing from an environmental standpoint, and also that you can make money there, which is not always the case when you look at socially responsible investing. It's a kind of a long story, but I was taking care of my parents for about a decade as they were aging, and they both passed in the last 5 years or so. And I kind of found myself, I wasn't really happy in the financial world. I found that my beliefs didn't quite fit with the financial world in general, and I just saw what was going on in the climate, and everything was becoming critical. And we were, I felt like we were coming to this a crisis point, and we needed to take action. And I didn't see people doing it, and I felt like I, for one, wasn't doing it. And so I took, I left finance, and for a year and a half, I was unemployed, which was not fun. But I took that time to go to climate reality training, which you've been through.
Oh, awesome.
I went to Stanford, and I got a sustainability certificate. I enrolled in Johns Hopkins, and I'm right now, I have another semester and a half left. I'll have a master's in energy policy and climate. And for that year and a half, I would meet with anyone who would talk to me about climate. So Nature Conservancy, Pew Charitable Trusts, World Resources International. I have a spreadsheet of, it's now over 200 people, but in 18 months, I met about 120 who had something to do with the environment.
Yeah, that's true. That's a fact.
And what I realized was, this is my tribe, first of all, like where I'm comfortable. And I was very close to going back to finance. I gave myself a deadline and said, okay, I'll go all out for a year to find a job in climate. If I don't, I've got to pay my mortgage. So, if not, go back to finance. And about 2 weeks before that year was up, I got hired by the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Wow. So yes, it was a close call, but here I am.
So you mean Mother Nature came to the rescue?
Yeah.
Great. I'm wondering, can you describe to us what you described at some point some of the losses you experienced around you, and what were some of the emotional responses as you think of how those losses could have impacted maybe you yourself, your family, your communities? What were some of the emotional responses that they had towards climate change?
That's a great question. Sadness. I think I felt a lot of kind of a deep sadness. I saw what was happening to the world. I'm a bicyclist, and so for the past 15 years or so, I've had this goal of going to someplace I've never been to do a bike ride, and it's taken me to some phenomenal places like Yellowstone. I did a Seattle to Portland ride on the east of Maryland, and every time I would go someplace, I would well, obviously we're outdoors the whole time, but I would feel what was going on with the climate. And I did a ride called the Hotter Than Hell 100 in Wichita Falls, Texas. There were no falls in Wichita Falls anymore. You know, the water had dried up there. They had a man-made fall, but it wasn't the same. So I just saw that, you know, I knew humans were behind it. I knew, you know, I was always a science and math minded person. So, you know, I understood carbon dioxide was in the environment. I knew that it was it trapped greenhouse gases and warmed us up, but I didn't really put it all together that it was so destructive. And like, you know, we've seen in Jakarta with all the horrible rains, they're having to pick up the entire city, Borneo. Just the way it can impact people's lives. I think we're going to see, I know we already have a lot of climate refugees. I think in the United States, a lot of the people that we are trying to keep at the border right now are really refugees. Whether it's because of war, but wars are generally over water or food, right? Which are again, they're all impacted by climate. So, you know, from an emotional standpoint, I just want to make the biggest impact that I can to make it a better world. And I know that sounds very simplistic and everything, but honestly, I feel like I am now in a place to do something like that.
Thank you so much. With some of the effects you've seen, you've spoken about displacements of people, environmental refugees, the crises all around us, extreme weather conditions. With all those pictures in mind, how do you imagine the future?
Well, good. You know, there was a great article in Time magazine a couple of months ago that Bill McKibben wrote. Bill McKibben, who founded 350 internationally, and he kind of pictures a utopian scenario where we have decarbonized the environment, electrified transportation, all buildings are LEED certified. I look at that, it's definitely a utopian vision. However, what we've seen happen already in the pandemic, behaviors can change on a dime, right? No one expected that we would be shut down and shut in for the last 7 or 8 months. We've seen that CO2 emissions have decreased, even though the actual measurement of CO2 parts per million is still going up. I mean, the problem, there's going to be a lag time between us changing our actions and the environment registering it. We are on this upward trajectory right now of more CO2 in the air, but I feel like most of the world, I believe the United States is behind. I know that we are behind the rest of the world at the moment. And I thank God the rest of the world does get that we need to change our behaviors and live more sustainably. I think that's happening. There's something in the United States right now called the U.S. Climate Alliance that 25 states are in, and they've all committed to reach or exceed the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. So we've had that for the last few years. We need an administration that has the political will and will back us up in what we need to do. And again, you know, as you know, you learned it at Climate Reality. We know the science, we know the solutions. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that statement leads me to my next question. And now the background is that if we explain that greenhouse gases and maybe the basis of physics, that people will just assume that, okay, maybe that's all we need to decarbonize the economy. We need to move into renewables. But however, experience have shown that people actually sometimes have their minds made up. And so some social scientists will define it as the deficit model, when we imagine that people do what they do because they don't have the information. So let's fill them up with information. And unfortunately, we found out that when we give people information, especially people with bias, they still use that information, to reinforce the belief that they have. In the course of what you do, what are some of the pushback you've had with people when you try to share some of the science of climate change?
That's a good question. Also, I think you don't really lead with the science necessarily. I think you lead with what have you noticed? I mean, I think you make it personal. I think to communicate adequately and have an impact about climate change, you need to make it personal to whoever you're speaking with. And so that could require hearing more about their story, seeing what's important to them. If their children are number one, then one thing very important to me is what's happening right now around the world. Our planet is unhealthy. It's an unhealthy atmosphere. So, we're seeing more respiratory issues and cancer. And if you care about your children, then start taking action to make the air healthier, make the water healthier. Is it places around the world where you've that you just love? I mean, like I think of Venice, Venice being so susceptible to sea level rise. Where I came from, I lived in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware for the last 15 years and did a couple of presentations there on sea level rise. And there's actually a website called Surging Seas. You can put in your address and see.
Surging Seas.
Have you seen that? Yeah, it's great.
I'll check it out.
Check it out. You put in your address and it shows you're underwater if water level rises 3 feet or there's a flood. So there's a lot of valuable property that is underwater there within, projected to be in probably the next 20 years or so, yet they continue to build. People are just kind of putting their heads in the sand and thinking, well, it won't be in my lifetime. So, why should I care? I feel like you've got to connect on a personal level. So yeah, I've seen pushback that I felt was because people were not informed with just the very basic information. And there are always some people you will never convince. And you have to learn to let that go. Catherine Hayhoe from, she's a scientist. She talks about global weirding. She has a PBS show called Global Weirding. Yeah, very.
I've not seen that before.
Okay, well, I've learned a lot from her. She was in Atlanta class at Climate Reality, and she is an evangelical Christian living in Lubbock, Texas, living in the middle of oil country, and she goes out on a daily basis and talks to people who are highly religious and in the oil business, and has to convince them to change their ways and make some modifications to address climate change. So I've learned a lot from her about meeting people where they are.
Great, thank you so much. It's been an eventful experience for you thus far. I want to make a reference to your post on your Facebook page, and that you said something out. There's a quote, and let me read it out. You said, "I'm giving my all to reverse climate change. To what end? To the end of me." What triggered that thought?
Well, it just came out. Actually, it just came out. I thought it was kind of funny, and I also knew that it was the truth. For however many more years I have, I figure I've got a good 15 more years to fight, in my career to reverse climate change. And I have goals. I've been following what's going on, and I look at the portfolio standards all these states have, and my job is to just do everything I can. When I'm gone, I want whoever's left to know that I did everything I could. And I may be getting a later start, but I feel like I needed to understand all those other pieces. I needed to understand the economics and the science and the health impacts and the ability to communicate. And maybe it took me, this many years to get here, but I'm here.
Great, you're welcome. If you ask me, I think it's never too late to be right. I mean, it's what you've always wanted to do, and also understood from your write up that was one of your teenagers' aspiration, like to return back to nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's you're fulfilling your one of your goal aspirations, and that is encouraging to everybody that listens. And I wonder, maybe let me ask you that question. In your own view, do you really think that the system is going to undergo a voluntary change, as in business as usual? Our dream for that utopian world
Mm-hmm.
is going to change voluntarily. I mean, the system is going to create it voluntarily.
I do not think it's a voluntary change. I think economics leads a lot of it. There's a theory called creative destruction, which is how one technology, an old technology, is replaced by a newer technology. Right here is an example of it. So, communications, we started a long time ago in the United States for something called a party line that people could hop on, and a couple people would share the same telephone line. Then eventually there were landlines, and that morphed into cell phones, and that morphed into Zoom communications and having the ability to do everything on your phone. So creative destruction is how something economically becomes no longer the choice. And that's exactly what I am seeing with our fossil fuel transition. And an excellent example of this is Ørsted, which is a Danish company that built the first wind farm off of Block Island, Rhode Island. There's an array of 5 turbines there. Ørsted was the first company to come to America and put this wind farm in. They used to be the Danish oil and natural gas company.
Yeah.
So they changed their business model from an oil and natural gas company to a wind energy company, and they're profitable. So I look at them as an excellent example of how a company can change their business model, still be profitable, create a healthy environment, and I do unfortunately believe it comes down to money in the end. That's what it's going to take is these companies being forced to move forward and stop. There's something called stranded assets. So stranded assets, or like big oil, are all of the pipelines that are out there that'll never be used to capacity. These plants, if they build them today, that are already almost obsolete. Because there's always it's called a clean energy portfolio that can replace any oil and gas or fossil fuel production. There's always some other way to do it using renewable energy.
Great. Thank you. That's quite impressive. Great. So how would that understanding that the culture is not going to change, voluntarily, like you just highlighted, how would that understanding maybe influence our tactics, our approach to, as we advocate and clamor for more climate justice around the world? So what should be in the back of everybody that is willing to, like you said, try to work to reverse climate change, and to the end of all of us, what that understanding that the culture is not going to change voluntarily, how should that influence our tactics and maybe strategies?
Are you asking like what can one do on a personal level, or?
Yeah, personal level, as an individual that's willing, that looks into that future, that utopian future, but still willing to work like you're working.
Okay.
But
Okay,
knowing fully well
sure.
that the system will be very rigid in changing.
Okay. So like the first steps that you would take. All right. Well, one thing that you can very easily do, everyone can very easily do, is divest of fossil fuels. Don't hold them in your portfolio. If you're a company, if you're working for a company, you have a retirement plan, a 401k, an IRA, get rid of fossil fuels, get rid of the Exxons and Chevrons and until they change their business model. Because once the money stream dries up to these companies, they can't continue in business. A benefit of the pandemic is that a lot of oil and gas companies have really been pinched, and fracking, the fracking industry cannot get a loan. They're carrying very, very heavy debt already. And so that makes them a very bad business decision, a very bad investment. So that is one thing you can do without leaving the couch, is make sure you have nothing, that none of your money is going to those types of companies. They're also, frankly, a very bad investment right now if you watched what's been going on in the industry. That's an easy way to get started. And then on a personal level, you know, going more vegan, changing your diet. You know, I don't want to talk the talk and not walk the walk. I'm not a vegan. I'm working on it, but you know, whatever you can do to eat a little bit less meat, start doing that. If you can walk more, we are seeing a good thing happen in urban design and urban planning, where they are trying to make more walkable, livable communities to reduce the need to be on transportation. Transportation is almost 30% of the emissions that we have in the United States. So, you know, cutting back, ride your bike, walk, buy an EV. I'm hoping we'll do another program like the Cash for Clunkers that was done many years ago to get really old cars off the road, but to help people move from a gasoline-powered car to an electric vehicle. Again, it takes political will. And it takes some personal sacrifice, but that's how change happens.
And of course, and you're leading that change. You're leading that sacrifice. I wonder if in my conversation with a lot of people, some have shared some personal reflection with me as to how just like you, they felt drawn to work for the environment, to do something to resolve some of the environmental crisis we go through, but they're locked into their jobs, just like you were. And that will lead me to your interview in the Wall Street Journal under advising for change, for when people want to change jobs. You said something that people need to find their motivation, that whatever that spark is, they need to be tenacious and to remember to seek for help and to also seek for their own support system. Can you elaborate more on that?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm very lucky. When I was reaching out to people, when I was unemployed, they were very kind. They gave me their time. They gave me a lot of their knowledge. And I have a fantastic family and a great group of friends that have supported me when I was like, you know, was I crazy to ever think I could go work on climate change? But I was very driven to try to do so at the same time. So I just kept believing it was going to happen. I kept my head down. I kept working really hard. And I had some tough moments in there, but I had someone there, my sister or a good friend, you know, to help me get through it. So yes, it's not easy to ask for help. That's a very hard thing, I think. It was certainly hard for me to do. But, you know, that's why we really are all in this together. And you know, I had mentioned to you before we started that global climate justice blog that I was writing with my climate reality team. And what we learned in that was that what is happening to someone in their backyard in Indonesia is very similar to what's going on, here in Delaware. And it was a way of really shrinking the world and helping to realize that we're all sharing the same air, and it is our only planet that we have. So, and it's really not that big. And that little changes make a big difference.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a wonderful time with you today. I learned so much from you, and I hope we have another opportunity. Yes. You said something?
I had asked you before a little bit about your background. Do you want to tell everyone here what you've been through?
Well, I have lived all my life, most of my adult life, working for the planet. I just came to that realization that having known all I know about the environmental degradation and the pollution, and knowing fully well that with business as usual, things are not going to change. And I just couldn't pretend not to know. I couldn't pretend not to be called to be part of that change. So I have led all my life sometimes at risk to me, advocating for climate justice, speaking truth to government, personal cost to me, and even to my family. Because I'm doing it from this place of gratitude. That the least I could give to the planet for all I've enjoyed from creation to this point, or from cradle to this point. I live in a place where I pay rent every month, but I don't pay rent for the use of the air, the space, the beautiful planet that I use. And with that sense of gratitude that the earth has given me, allow me to be selfish, because that's what drives me. That I have a personal reason to lead the change. And so even when I am confronted with, when I know the food price is going to be dangerous, I'm still willing to go ahead, because some people, some communities, some individuals, we all have to be voices of the change that we want to see in the world.
Well, you're doing it.
Thank you.
You're doing it with the show. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on and tell my story.
No. Thank you once again. And so before you leave, please, there's a poem I want to read to you. It's a goodwill poem.
Okay.
So I'm saying to you, Janet, that may all the healers of the earth find their own healing. May they be filled by the passionate love for the earth. May they know their fears, but not be stopped by their fears. May they feel their anger and yet not be ruled by rage. May they honor their grief, but not be paralyzed by sorrow. May they transform their fears, rage, and grief into compassionate and inspiration to act in service of what they love. May they live in the right places at the right time, in the right place. May they bring alive the great awakening, opening a listening ear to hear the earth's voice. Transform imbalance to balance, hate and greed to love. May the healers of the earth be blessed. Janet, I wish you well in your life's aspiration and in all your endeavor.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Tostine.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate your being here, and I look forward to having you again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. So, Ed, folks, that's our edition today with Janet Redman on how she shared her climate stories, and I hope that you're inspired. You're also willing to. The most important resource for all of us is the planet. Without the planet, there's no economy. So our responsibility to save all that we have for ourselves and for future generation. So until I come your way again next one, please share this with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and go do something for the earth. Bye-bye.